When Russia's own naval officers look out at their navy, they come to a very startling realization. Across every sea that they sail, Russia's navy is coming apart. A fleet that keeps losing safe harbors and cannot fully protect its main bases. Remember the Black Sea cruiser Moskva when it sunk? The rest of the fleet was pushed out of Sevastopol, occupied Crimea. But those warships were forced to shelter on Russia's own coastline. But now we have seen that Ukraine can even reach them there. Or look at the nuclear submarines, the infrastructure that has been shaken by earthquakes and decades of neglect. Fuel, repair yards, and money are being burned away even faster than they can be replaced. Wherever we look, the Caspian, the Arctic, the Pacific, the Black Sea, the same weaknesses keep appearing. Inside the Russian system, they know that this is not a one time problem. This is a pattern, and it's a pattern that is getting rapidly worse. My name is Jason Smart. I'm a special correspondent for the Kyiv Post and a national security advisor. The situation for the Russian Navy is truly horrific, and it is most certainly getting worse. I've spent the last couple of days looking deeply at their Navy and what's going on there and how all of these dots fit together. And once you see the bigger picture, you'll come to the same realization. The Russian Navy is not doing so well. So let's dive into this. Let's take a look at what's really happening with this Navy, these rusting buckets that they call their Navy, and see what is actually happening, despite the Russian propaganda saying that everything is fine, which, as you know, is the reason this channel exists, to get the truth of what's actually happening inside of Russia, beyond the propaganda, and what's really happening here, where I am, in Kyiv, Ukraine. And you can help me in that mission by just doing one very simple thing, one favor. Subscribe to this channel, like this video, and consider becoming a channel member today. And as always, please do check the first comment of how you too can contribute for Ukrainian soldiers to get life-saving drones. So let's take a look at what's really happening in Novorossiysk and another of the couple other attacks so you can see how they all fit together. So as you recall, Novorossiysk is the home of one of Russia's most important ports. It's actually the only one on their coast that can handle major repairs and fuel flows at the scale that Russia requires. But back in July 2025, a Ukrainian naval drone hit a Russian fleet support vessel there, and that was just the first of many attacks to come. In September 2025, Ukrainian drones hit industrial areas around Novorossiysk. But as the pressure was building there, it moved a little bit further along, and we saw on the coast of Tuapse. Tuapse, of course, is where they process refined products, but it's also where they process a lot of the production for Russian military logistics. Back in March 2025, we also saw Ukrainian drones that ignited fires at the Tuapse refinery. November 2025, we saw it happen all over again. On November 14th, Ukrainian drones came to visit, and they were able to strike an S-400 air defense compound and triggered powerful secondary detonations that now it looks like that port will not be used anytime soon. Even the partial destruction of these S-400s, they say up to 7 of them may have been destroyed, is something incredible. If it is true, and there were 7 that were destroyed, that's Russia's largest single loss in a long time. But according to OSINT analysis that was done by MT Anderson, there's something else very interesting. After the attack, we see that there are no merchant vessels anywhere in the harbor or the nearby roads. However, we see that the Russian Navy, it's still there. So why are they still there when all of the civilian ships have already fled? Well, the answer is very simple. Because they realize that Ukraine can strike at any time, but the Russian Navy has nowhere else to go. Where can they physically take these ships? These ships today are sitting ducks. Ukrainian maritime attacks using these air drones as well as the maritime drones are things that Russia is wholly unprepared for. And because of that, when Ukraine is using something like a Magur V5, the maritime drone, it makes sure that it is the one that dictates what happens in Russia's waters. But there's something else going on that's fascinating about this little drone, which is not so little. It's 5.5 meters long, about 18 feet, and it weighs about 1 metric ton, 2,200 pounds. It carries an explosive payload of about 300 to 350 kilograms, 660 to 770 pounds of explosives. But the very cool part about it is how effective it is. It can go up to 800 kilometers, or about 500 miles, to reach every regional port of Russia. Today, air defenses must track dozens of small, fast, low targets at once, while the actual attack might come from the waters around their ships. So today, Ukrainian officials are saying that their new drones, the ones that they're now developing, they are going to be able to strike Novorossiysk, Tuapse, Sochi, and Kapiesk. What's the most fascinating part about that is this places every refinery, depot, radar site within risk. So let's look at the Caspian Sea strike, because that's pretty important. It proves that even Russia's missile carriers are no longer safe. On the Caspian Sea, Russia had based ships that launched the Kaliber missiles that are used to attack Ukraine. These ships are housing the naval base in Kapiesk, which is on the western shore. The base sits about 1,500 kilometers, 930 miles from Ukrainian territory. For years, Russia was sure that it was always giving their backup. It would always be safe, far, far beyond Ukrainian reach, Ukrainian retaliation. But that belief now has been challenged. It's been proven to be false. These Ukrainian drones hit a missile ship inside Kapiesk harbor itself. The ships, named Tatarstan and Dagestan, sustained documented damage at their moorings. But also, several Bullion M-class missile corvettes were also hit in the very same strike. These small missile ships serve as launch platforms for Kaliber cruise missiles, which rain terror here on Ukraine, that destroy Ukraine's energy. So when your long-range missile carriers are burning in a landlocked sea, you know that the problem is a little bit bigger than just bad luck. Russia cannot repair or replace the naval losses at scale. The fact is that blows like Novorossiysk or Tuapse or Kapiesk, they show that for any navy, things are about to get worse. Because the fundamental problem is not simply one-offs. It is that Ukraine is now systemically decommissioning the Russian Navy. It is attacking it regularly. But where can they take these ships? Consider it. If you're Novorossiysk, where do you go from there? If you are today in the Caspian, where do you go from there? Where can Russia move its navy that will be safe? It has very few options ahead, and none of them look very good. Now, it's important to note that Russia's ability to repair its navy, it was already pretty well degraded before the full-scale invasion of Ukraine. Back in 2018, there was a famous case of the PD-50, the floating dry dock in Murmansk, that sank. It was the only dock capable of lifting the carrier Admiral Kuznetsov. And during the Admiral Kuznetsov's refit, having had multiple onboard fires, the dock sank. Now, that experience also taught us something else, how deep the corruption really went. In fact, we can look at the Murmansk court records and see the sentencing of the former dock manager. Of course, corruption played a role in why it all fell apart. But today, because of this, heavy hull maintenance cycles are now being severely limited across the entire Russian Navy. Corruption in the naval procurement process is out of control, in fact. Today, we see that it's leading to one physical loss in the Russian Navy after another. In 2025, a naval officer received a long sentence for bribes for the navigation systems. Contracts are inflated, components are substandard, and very often the money is just embezzled. But that's why today there's not been a lot of refitting in the Russian Navy. They've actually tried to spend a lot of money repairing it, but it all just disappears. But that's why a Navy that cannot repair itself, it can't even fix basic things, it's just waiting to see more losses. And that's all because of theft in the Russian Navy. But when you look at the Pacific, it gets no better there, because it's not just corruption working against the Russian Navy in the Pacific, it's also Mother Nature. On July 30th, 2025, we saw a magnitude 8.8 earthquake strike off the coast of Kamchatka. Tsunami waves then entered Avacha Bay, and within minutes, of course, the water levels began to rise. Russia's Rybachi submarine base sits inside that very vulnerable bay. Rybachi hosts the Bory-class ballistic missile submarines and the Yasin-class nuclear attack submarines. It is the only base that Russia has in the Pacific that it can use for these submarines. Satellite imagery shows the damage was widespread in the floating pier. It was also damaged. One pier, its segment, appears torn from the anchor points, and the original position is totally shifted. But what it all means is this. Today, that base has become harder for the Russians to use. It is unclear if they can still use it at all. But Russia is trying to fix these things. It knows this is a big problem. This is something that is going to slow them down. But that's where it gets sort of funny. Since that singular earthquake, there's been 25 more above 6 magnitude. So just imagine this. They're trying to do repairs, and as they do the repairs, there are more earthquakes. There are more problems. Things are not getting better. Now, of course, there's another element of this that is very important, because it's not just corruption, it's not just Mother Nature. There are also Ukrainian strikes on Russian oil infrastructure, and it is deepening very quickly the Navy's fuel crisis. All of these ships, these bases, these repairs, depend on one thing that is being attacked every single week. Ukraine is increasingly hitting refineries and energy nodes very far from the front lines. In Volgorod, a refinery was hit about 500 kilometers, 300 miles from the front. We saw another refinery, 920 kilometers, 570 miles from Ukraine, also struck. One attack after another. Now, how do you have a navy that doesn't have diesel? What do you do when you don't have fuel? What do you do when your ships aren't safe and they don't have fuel and there's nowhere to go? And there's no one to repair the ships to get out of the port. When you look at it all compounds, you look at all these things working together against the Russian Navy, all these things working together, and it seems that it's almost impossible for Russia to get ahead. And that's the good news, because the economic base for Russia's naval power is also steadily eroding. Every destroyed ship, burning depot, damaged port, it has to be paid for. And Moscow doesn't have money. Urals crude has become cheaper and cheaper. That means less profit for Moscow. Today, given the fact that price is about $53.80 per barrel, it's going to be harder for Russia to pay its bills. It made its budget for 2025 to be at least $70 a barrel. They base their budget on that. So for every penny it's less, they have less ability to handle their budget. In fact, oil and gas budget revenues have fallen more than 26% year on year. But budget deficits are widening and the financial reserves are shrinking, and all of this is happening during wartime pressure. Today, it is only going to get worse. So Russia today, running out of money, not sure where to go, what to do, it's trying to find solutions. And that's why it's introducing every week new taxes. When you read the Russian news, it is pretty entertaining. The new things that they find, how they can tax. Where is it? We can make some more money. Now, we know that they're going for the fringe sectors, going after things like the bookmakers and those that work in betting, trying to tax them more, trying to tax people in any sort of rare profession because they have no other ability to keep their budget afloat. And that's why today it is getting worse with the inflation because their only solution is to print more money. But Russia faces one serious problem after another. And that's why today the total picture is a Russian naval system that is in decline across several oceans all at once. In the Black Sea, roughly 1/3 of Russia's pre-war fleet is destroyed or damaged. Key ships have been sunk or forced out of Sevastopol, and that's due to the Ukrainian attacks that have been sustained. Remaining vessels are hiding in ports that now today we see that Ukraine can reach. Ukraine will reach and will attack and will destroy with drones and missiles more of Russia's navy, more of Russia's ability to export oil, more of Russia's ability to commit terrorism. So today, the fleet is exposed. It is exposed as a target for Ukraine, sitting ducks waiting to be struck. Look at the Caspian again. The missile carriers have been hit hundreds of kilometers from Ukraine's borders. That reduces Russia's ability to launch caliber strikes from what once seemed like a deep cover. In the Pacific, a massive earthquake has damaged infrastructure. It's made their nuclear submarine base untenable. But everywhere, corruption, sanctions, choking repairs, replacements, and the lack of modernization are depriving Russia of a navy. It's Russia's navy that is losing one ship at a time, not as isolated incidences, but as something that all fits together. Because we have to look at this about losing safe ports, losing the ability to have fuel for your ships, losing the ability to have a credible budget to pay for anything. Today, it's losing the ability to intimidate its neighbors, to project power at sea. But inside of Russia's own navy, there's no denial left. They see that the collapse is spreading throughout their fleet. Ukraine is steadily turning Russia's navy from a strategic weapon into a long-term liability for the Kremlin. So Russia today, which once had a massive navy, a navy that was well known around the world, is left with nothing left to show for it. And that's why when we look at the news that Russia promises that it will come and defend Venezuela, it's pretty humorous. How will they get there? It seems quite unlikely that they would be able to do very much to help their allies there. The Russian Navy, the Russian ability to project strength, has forever been truncated. It is in decline. And that's why today we can be ever more sure that Russia's Navy, like Russia itself, is reaching its breaking point. Thank you for watching. Please like this video, subscribe to this channel, and consider becoming a channel member today. And do check out the first pinned comment how you too can contribute to Ukrainian soldiers getting life-saving drones. As always, thank you for supporting Ukraine.